It's time for Southern Fried Baseball, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Jake McKeever as he talks everything SEC baseball and more.
Welcome in, College Baseball Central fans of the SEC. That light is a little bit bright, so I'm just going to adjust it a little bit. Sorry about that, everyone. Episode 5 here as we're breaking down the Georgia Bulldogs. Really, really exciting team. Definitely overachieved off of last year in Wes Johnson's first season. There's a lot to like about this Georgia team going forward. There's a lot to like about where this program is currently. And again, let's go ahead and jump into Georgia as we talk about stuff on Southern Fried Baseball here. Obviously, here's Georgia. They are in the middle of a brand new renovation on their park, Foley Field. It was last renovated in 2021. For 2025, everything that is new is going to be mostly for players, as well as getting some stuff for the fans down the road. Right now, as it sits, Foley Field is 4th in the SEC. I think it has the potential to move up as these renovations kind of get completed and we see what they actually look like. But right now, it is one of the bottom stadiums in the SEC behind Condren, Plainsman Park, and Baum-Walker Stadium. From a uniform standpoint, there's a lot to like about the Georgia looks. It is my personal favorite, and it is my new number one. Headlining the uniform is obviously their new cream sets that they came out with last year. I think it was the best new uniform that was unveiled in baseball. Everything about it looks tremendous. Their road sets look really, really good. Their home whites with the Georgia typeface, I think, look tremendous. Their vest with that Georgia G can be worn with white pants, gray pants, pinstripes. Overall, it's a really, really great look for Georgia. They do a great variety of mixing in some of their hats, and they are our new number one from a uniform standpoint. Moving on, here is Georgia's schedule, as we do have their full schedule. So as we start to do more of these shows, we'll get everybody's full schedules going forward. The non-conference, I think, is a little bit underrated. They do play midweeks with Clemson. They do play midweeks with Kennesaw State, as well as a midweek with Georgia Tech that's sandwiched between Arkansas and Vandy. They open up with a Quinnipiac UNCW 4-game set where they played 2 of them each and a doubleheader on Saturday. UIC is another one where they're playing multiple games. Florida Gulf Coast is a perennial power from a mid-major standpoint, and it is a really underrated aspect of their schedule. Then obviously Columbia, who led the Ivy and won the Ivy regular season championship, as they look to kind of break through and win the Ivy. They're another one of an underrated teams. Then from the SEC, it really, really is a tough schedule as they avoid Ole Miss and a few other schools. They open up with Kentucky, as it'll be kind of a redemption arc for a few guys on there that we'll talk about here in a little bit. They go to Condren in week 2, followed by Auburn at Texas. Then here's where it kind of gets really tough as they go Arkansas, Vandy, OU, Missouri, and then Alabama at Texas A&M. So they really are going to have to stack up some of those wins early, stack up some of those wins late, because that middle part of that schedule is going to be one of the toughest ones to navigate. And again, the graphic that never works. I'm not sure why this seems to be the case, but when I highlight it on my slideshow, it looks the exact same. This is who they are replacing, headlined obviously by Charlie Condon at the top of that lineup. Corey Collins is another one that I think is going to be really, really missed. Dylan Boldestein is another one that I think will be missed. Dylan Carter, I think they found a tremendous replacement. Fernando Gonzalez was kind of a back and forth guy there. I don't think he'll be missed as much. And then Clayton Chadwick, the graduate transfer from Sam Houston last year, is another one that they're replacing. Again, there is a ton of stuff here to replace, as again, Charlie Condon was a mainstay in this Georgia lineup. He played first, he played third, he played center, he DH'd, he broke, it seemed like every single record in the book. So as Georgia goes about replacing him, I think that's going to be the one that you really kind of circle. And like Florida last week, I think that this Georgia team's actually a little bit deeper. Despite losing their best player in Charlie Condon, they absolutely unloaded in the portal. They got a ton of talent. Last year they did it, and it looked great. They brought in 21 new transfers, 16 of them from D1 4U universities, 5 via the JUCO rank. They brought in 13 freshmen too as well. So they are kind of an older team. But again, this is what we're kind of seeing in the SEC is a lot of these older teams. Where they sit in the pitching, I have them as 4th in the SEC. They have a lot of guys that took tremendous steps forward. They have a few guys that they're going to be counting on. They have a few guys that are coming back from injuries. There's a lot that's really up in the air about this Georgia team that really has me ranked them fourth right now. Leighton Finley is going to be the guy that headlines that one down in the right five. Physically imposing guy is a 6'5", 230, 95-mile-an-hour fastball. His best outing was in the postseason against NC State. Against Army, he really struggled. Bounces back, throws 6 1/3, 8 hits, 1 earned run. Really gave Georgia a chance to win. They did end up winning that game to force a game 3. So that was where Georgia won their game, was when he started. 6-1 with a 4.14 ERA, K rate of a 76.22 in 76 innings over 17 appearances. 16 of those were starts. The one was, again, in the regional. He pitched on short rest, only threw an inning and pitched tremendous for them. I don't see him being a bullpen guy, though. I think he is going to be their solidified right in Sharpie Friday night guy. And he's going to be, I think, one of the more talented Friday night guys in the SEC. But every single guy is a Friday night guy, it seems like, in the SEC. Another guy that I think could be a Friday night guy is Colton Smith. I have him as the Saturday guy. 105 Ks in just 69 innings of work. Did allow 20 walks in 69 innings of work, so that is kind of something to watch, as I know Wes Johnson's a guy that loves to kind of pound the zone. Fastball's up to 95, but I think his best pitch is that cutter. It's up to 92, I believe. It has a ton of cut, and he can kind of throw it really, really good on that slider. Doesn't really tip a ton of pitches. His ERA did leave something to be desired, as it was up in the 550s. Obviously, it got better down the road, and a lot of those were early season ones when he was kind of taking his lumps. I think that he's going to be a true Saturday guy for them. He's a guy that I think if he is a Saturday guy, is a lot better than a lot of these ones in the SEC, where if he's a Friday night guy, I think he's a little bit worse. So he's kind of a fringe SEC Friday night, Saturday night guy. Then from there, that's where things kind of get up in the air. There's a few names here. Obviously, Charlie Goldstein. He was the Friday night guy last year. Coming back from a UCL injury, when I was reading some of the articles from some of their writers, he is throwing. He is doing light bullpen work. So don't expect him to kind of be a Sunday starter. If he is good to go, though, I think he's one that's tremendous for Georgia. He gives them a ton of leverage. He has really wipeout stuff. And again, he was their Friday night guy last year. Another name to watch is Eric Hammond. That's going to be that USC transfer in the top left. I project him to kind of be that Sunday guy. Scouts rave about him, and he really kind of was a true under-the-radar guy. He has starter experience coming from USC. The Pac-12 is a true baseball conference, so don't expect a ton of drop-off for him. Weird arm slot guy, lanky. I think he's a guy that could be a Sunday guy. I think when Goldstein comes back, he could be a midweek guy. He's a long relief guy. His role really isn't defined. And Wes Johnson talks all the time about the versatility of his lineups. I think with his pitching rotation, that's another thing that you're going to have to watch out for, is how they kind of use Eric Hammond. Do they use him as a starter role? Do they use him as a weird arm slot guy to change up the motion? There's a ton of versatility here for this Georgia's team. Moving on, another guy to kind of watch out for that I think will be the midweek guy, Matthew Hoskins. He only threw 3 innings for them before he came down with an injury. The Northwoods League and some of the film that I watched, he looked tremendous. Obviously, the Northwoods League isn't the Kit Cod League, but there are a ton of D1 talents that go and play in the Northwoods League, and he went out there and dominated like he was a true SEC pitcher. Moving on into that bullpen, I think that this is where Georgia really shines. The hallmark of it is Wes Johnson building the depth. He's got a ton of recruits that came in, and it's headlined by JT Quinn and Alton Davis coming over from other SEC teams. JT Quinn was obviously the Ole Miss starter last year, had tremendous stuff at times. Obviously struggled with command a ton at Ole Miss, was sometimes a starter for him. Seemed like every single week Ole Miss was kind of playing, pick a card if JT Quinn was going to go. I think if Wes Johnson can simplify his stuff, and as we've seen with a few pitching coaches around the country, that sometimes it's just a complex approach that gets in these pitchers' head. It seems like that's what's working with Jay Johnson. His changeups looks a ton better. His command's going to be doing better in the fall. So he's going to be one guy that you can kind of expect to be in this role. Alton Davis was another guy who was a mainstay in that Bama bullpen. He ate up a ton of innings for them down the stretch. He's a big power guy. Fastball's, I think, up to 98 from what I read. He's going to be a guy that you kind of watch out for. And then a few of the transfers that I talked about too as well. Zach Harris and Zach Brown are 2 other guys that you could kind of find in that fringe midweek guy, fringe Sunday guy, kind of like Eric Hammond, where some weeks I think that they'll throw. They do have tremendously high ERAs. Harris obviously coming over from Georgia Southern and Brown coming over from Ohio State. He's another guy that really kind of flew under the radar. 6'4" Analytics had him, I think, down in the 300-400s as a transfer. He's raved about him. I've talked to a few scouts that are in that area that say he's going to be kind of one of the steals of the draft going forward. Expect him to kind of shoot up boards. And then Zach Harris just seems to be a guy that just pounds the zone going forward. There's a lot to like about this Georgia one. Lastly, they returned their closer in Brian Zeldin. He led the team last year with 6 saves. Electric pitcher. I got to see him when they played at Texas A&M. Really is a spin guy. So there's a lot to like about this Georgia team. The only reason I think that they have their pitching so low is obviously there's a ton of talented teams in the SEC. The depth is there, but I don't know if they kind of have that high-end rotation. They kind of remind me, from as a staff standpoint, a little bit of South Carolina from last year, where they have a ton of guys that would be elite Saturday, Sunday guys, but they really don't have that knockdown, strike you out Friday night guy. Moving on into our projected lineup, the graphic, honestly, from what I could find, it was one of the craziest ones, so it really wasn't worth it to put in a graphic, as there's just so many guys that I think are vying for playing position. Let's go ahead and start with kind of, I think, the obvious ones, and even then, they're not really that obvious. Returning starters are Slade Alford, Colby Branch, and Trey Phelps. Branch will play short. The Baylor transfer last year, he's coming over. He played tremendous for him. Hit the ball over 300. He hit 17 home runs too as well. He's a tremendous glove. Then from there, how are they going to use Slade Alford and Trey Phelps? Trey Phelps is a guy that DH for him, has a ton of pop out of that thing. Hit 353 for them as a freshman and 12 home runs. Was a freshman All-American, I believe, for the SEC as well as for the country. Do they move him into a second base spot? I've heard they've used him in the outfield in the corners. They've used him at second. He's going to be – they've DH'd him. I think he's one that you can kind of see. He's 6'2", 180, so he's not a big enough body to where you would stick him at first base. I have him playing at second, but again, there's a lot that you could kind of talk in where you can plug and play him anywhere. And then Slade Alford coming over from Mississippi State in 2023. He's another guy. He played second. He played third when Charlie Condon was in the outfield. He's one where the bat's going to be in the lineup. His glove isn't going to be elite. It's not going to win any gold gloves. It's good enough to play. And then the bat is a mature perch. You're getting a 4-year SEC starter that's coming in that really is almost unheard of in this day and age. So those are going to be the 3 guys that you know will play somewhere. And then from there, you don't know what's going to be the case there. Behind the plate, expect a battle between Henry Hunter. I had to do a double check on that one, as I've been calling him Hunter Henry in a lot of my pre-shows. Henry Hunter was a guy that battled for Georgia last year, started a ton of games for him. I believe it was over 30. Expect him to be in the lineup. Wes Johnson has already come out and said that, Henry Hunter isn't going to be a guy that starts every single day, but he's going to have a tough time leaving him out of the lineup. That opens the door, I think, for Daniel Jackson coming over from Wofford. They're very, very similar players that manage staffs, can hit the ball good enough, but they're definitely going to be a bottom-of-the-order guy for Wes Johnson. Expect them to kind of do a platoon style, if not where one of them plays first, one of them DHs. Again, Wes Johnson speaks volumes about the versatility. Moving over to first, these are the 2 bats that I really kind of project will be competing for the job over there, and it's 2 big guys. Charlie Jones coming over from Air Force. He hit 344 with 13 home runs. Be very, very careful when you look at those numbers, as they're always kind of gaudy numbers. Remember that Air Force plays up in the mountains. They play up in the altitude. They play in a lot of shootouts in the Mountain West. So take that one with a grain of salt. But the name that I'm really excited about is Rylan Zabrowski coming over from Miami of Ohio. He led the MAC in home runs, one off of the school record for Miami of Ohio. Was really kind of their mainstay. They didn't have a ton of talent around him, so pitchers were kind of pitching around him a bit. Again, hit 21 home runs, up from, I believe it was 5 the year before. So 4x'd his home run total. He's a huge, physically imposing guy. He's 6'5", I think 230. I expect him to kind of be the one that takes over that job. But again, you can't go wrong with Charlie Jones. Both of them are athletic enough, I think, to play third, to play a corner outfield spot too as well. Again, there's a ton of versatility. I feel like that's going to be the name of the game with this Georgia team, is versatility. It seems like they have a ton of guys that are just Swiss Army knives that can play anywhere. And then from there, there's a few other names that I think are talking about in that second base conversation with Trey Phelps. Ryan Black coming over from UTA. He hit 270 as a freshman. He led that team in OPS as a freshman for UT Arlington. He's another guy that I really got to watch that I liked when I saw him when they played Houston. There's a ton of stuff to like. He plays tremendous, tremendous defense. It's weird being a glove first guy because the bat plays really well. And it seems like every time you say somebody's a glove first guy that they're a negative hitter. I think he's, somebody that can win a gold glove. He's somebody that can hit the ball tremendously well. I expect him to kind of be in the mix. Another one is Christian Adams from Florida Atlantic, coming over with a 343 average and 8 home runs as he makes the trip from Boca Raton up to Athens. I think it's going to be these three that kind of compete for that second base job. Again, you could kind of throw Slade Alford in there too as well. It's going to be interesting to see what Wes Johnson does. And again, there's just a ton of depth on this team. There's 5, 6, 7 guys that you could say, okay, I could see this guy playing in the outfield for him. Again, Hunter Henry's another guy that you could see playing in the outfield. But the thing that really impresses me about this outfield is the athleticism. They have the potential at times to employ 3 center fielders, as Nolan McCarthy's coming over from Kentucky. He hit 325 within 7 home runs and 30 conference plays off a team that went to the College World Series and really over-attained. He's, I think, the guy that you can kind of write in to be that SEC center fielder for them. He's an athletic guy. He can run down balls all over the field. Devin Obi is another guy that's coming over from Duke. He didn't play in the fall just because he was still graduating from Duke. So as he comes over from Duke, he's going to have to be inserted into that lineup, I think, just because the power is just there. He hit 309 for him, 16 home runs, athletic enough to be in center field for Duke. I think that they use him as a right fielder, if not a left fielder. McCarthy kind of moving in and out too. Both of these guys I think are going to start for this Georgia team. Moving on, Robbie Burnett is another one coming over from UC Asheville. Had a tremendous season. He's going to be a junior, a mature bat, hit 323 with 18 home runs, added 15 stolen bases. So there's a ton of speed there too as well. Like I said, any of these 3 guys could play center field. I think that that's going to be what they end up employing, is going to be these 3 guys in some way, shape, or form. And this doesn't even include some of the other guys that you can kind of throw in the mix, like a Jake Morant, a Luke Ferris. Daniel Jackson's another guy that a lot of people are really raving about from this Georgia team. There's just so much versatility on this team. They have the potential, like Florida, like Arkansas, to start about 15 or 16 different guys. There's a ton of open competition, which I think is what Wes Johnson wants. When you build a team through the transfer portal, that really is always the worry, is that you're just getting guys that are going to come in, be complacent, think that they're at the top of the mountain, that they have a guaranteed starting role. And that is not the case for this Georgia team at all. There's no guarantees on this. Henry Hunter started a ton of games for them last year. They bring in a Wofford transfer. He's a guy that you really are going to have to compete with the job for. They brought in a few talented freshmen, but again, the name of the game with this one is an older team. The 3 freshmen that I think you can kind of watch out for, that when I've read the stuff about them have been in the lineup, is Cade Brown. He's a guy who's played first, he's played third, he's played left, he's played right. Big body. From what I could see, he really is kind of an ambush hitter. It's going to be interesting to see if that kind of translates to SEC play. He has a tremendous approach that's definitely far beyond his years. He's not athletic enough to find himself in that second base conversation. He can hit well enough to find himself into a DH conversation, like we saw with Trey Phelps last year. He's one to watch out for. Eric Parker, I think, is a defensive replacement, is somebody that you want to say, okay, when some of the other guys leave, when Branch leaves, he's going to be the shortstop of the future. He's got to work into his frame a little bit. He definitely looks like a high schooler. He is 6'3", only $180. As he kind of gets into a high school strength program, I think he's going to be somebody that you watch out for to be a future All-American on this Georgia team if he kind of sticks it out. He's a defensive guy. I didn't see any film on him from this past season, but when I watched film on him for Perfect Games that he went to back in his junior year, he really did a tremendous job fielding the ball, and there's a lot to like about him going forward on this Georgia team. Moving on into our SEC teams ranked, I have Georgia as the 3rd out of 5 in the SEC. Arkansas stays at 1. Florida stays at 2. Georgia at 3, followed by Auburn and Alabama holding it down in that 5th spot. This is the potential to be a top 10 team. It really does. I have them super high in my SEC one. I know a lot of people were kind of all over the board with them, which is almost expected from transfer people going forward. Let me go ahead and pull up what it was that we had them ranked, as it was a little bit all over the place for Yeah, I had them as high as 4th in the SEC. Some people had them as low as 10th or 11th behind South Carolina. That is kind of what you expect from these transfer portal teams. They're going to breed competition, and I think in turn there's a lot of stuff that you can trust. Here is the bell curve for Georgia. On the high end, I think it's a super regional team. They have a few too many question marks for me, I think, for them to be an Omaha team or a team that you can kind of lock into Omaha. They're obviously, based on their location, going to get matched up with an elite ACC school, which is always kind of tough. And that really has kind of been their downfalls. They've had a few good teams in the past. They've hosted some regionals. They finally broke out of the regional last year, made it to the super regional for the first time since 2008, which was actually ironically the last time that they went to Omaha, as they finished a runner-up to Florida State. I think their main bell curve is an SEC bye in the tournament. I think that they have the talent to be at the top half of the SEC, if not a top 4 team in the SEC. If everything goes right for them, I think that they are hosting a regional. Their floor is a regional. They just have so much depth. I don't see a world where the wheels kind of fall off. They have too many dudes, I think, for the wheels to kind of fall off in that situation. Back to this just horrendously bad lighting. I'll go ahead and fix that for the next show. But as we come upon the 20 minutes, that is kind of where we tend to break off for it. I always like to give a bold prediction out of this. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that they have no all SEC teams. I think that this is going to be a deep, deep team. There isn't somebody that I think has the potential to be an all SEC team. I know that is kind of a hot take, but I think that they're just kind of a good old fashioned, almost like a Kentucky team last year, where they're so old, they're going to have so many guys that are bought in. I think that they lead the SEC in pitching ERA. That's going to be my hot take, is that Georgia leads the SEC in the pitching ERA. Well, I believe that that's all we have time for. Thanks again for tuning into episode 5 of Southern Fried Baseball. I'm going to have to pull the alphabetical order just to see who the next one is going forward as I pull up that graphic. Actually, I forgot that I had them in alphabetical order on the graphic. It is going to be Kentucky up next. So I'll be sure to tweet this out. Bonnie will put it on Spotify for those that listen to Spotify. Thanks again for tuning in.